The coronavirus has impacted millions of people, with so many families grieving a loss. Even many survivors face a rough recovery. New at 10 tonight, KTVU's Maureen Naylor shares one very personal story of struggle and triumph in the age of COVID-19.
What you're looking at may not look like anything unusual, but this is a glimmer of hope in what has been an otherwise tough year. You may not recognize him here.
He's one of the first reporters on the scene.
Good morning. We spoke with the owner.
But Matt Keller is no stranger to the camera.
This is the first time you're seeing this side of the crime scene.
For more than 20 years, he worked as a local news reporter and anchor for several television stations, including KTVU. But in early March 2020, right after his daily run, the 44-year-old knew something was off.
I got out of bed and I coughed, and it was a weird cough, a cough I'd never had before. The next day, the fever had gotten bad, went all the way up to 103.4, and I was just wondering, like, what's going on?
Matt eventually found out at Good Samaritan Hospital in San Jose. He tested positive for the coronavirus.
I asked the infectious disease doctor, so what should I expect? And he says, I don't know, I've only been treating this for a week.
It turns out he was one of the first 50 confirmed coronavirus cases in Santa Clara County, a region hit hard early on in the pandemic. As you're soon going to see, this story is not one of numbers for this journalist. For me, this one's very personal. I hadn't seen the video of you running yet.
Oh, that was the first time you'd seen it too?
You see, Matt is my husband. In what he describes as the hardest physical battle of his life, he spent 9 days in the hospital fighting COVID-19.
They said, well, we're going to put you under, and I said, how long? And they said, well, it could be weeks, it could be months, it depends on how your body does.
At one point, his oxygen levels dropped, and on the brink of being put on a ventilator, he wrote goodbye letters to me and our daughters.
Realizing that I could be unconscious and on basically life support for weeks or months, that's when I wrote the emails to the girls and to you. And that was probably the hardest point at that point. I FaceTimed you and we didn't say anything. We just looked at each other for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just in silence.
Yeah, because it's like, what do you say to each other when you're faced with?
Yeah, and that was it. And it was just like this understanding of like, we don't know what's going to happen. And
it took months, but thankfully, Matt recovered.
Mr. Keller!
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
With laughter and an awkward non-handshake, we were able to reunite with the infectious disease doctor who helped keep Matt off a ventilator.
I said he's young and healthy, so we should try not to intubate him if possible.
Dr. Shumat Majumdar pointed out there are more treatment options now than in March, but also 3 times as many patients. We also know our family is one of the fortunate ones.
it wasn't easy. It did not bounce back. My body was I had to remember I was flat on my back for 8 weeks.
Upon returning from the hospital, we spent weeks isolated from each other. Then my husband read an article about possible long-term effects on COVID patients, and he got angry.
And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do something I've never done. I'm going to run a marathon.
His marathon mission began when he simply had enough strength to go for a walk in our backyard.
I mean, I was in the backyard here, and I'd walk, and then I'd jog maybe a little bit to the other side just to see what it would do to my oxygen levels. And then the next day I'd do a little bit more and a little bit more.
I felt every mile.
With his doctor's clearance, Matt eventually started training for a marathon.
It was painful, and I remember I think there was an 8-mile run or a 9-mile run that I came home and I just dropped everything. You saw me, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this.
Let me be honest, I wasn't a big fan of this quest. Dr. Michael Fredrickson is a professor of sports medicine at Stanford University and understands why I was concerned.
That's another thing that's unusual about this virus is that you may start to feel great and you start to get back to things, and then it hits you again with another wave and you're set back again. So it's a slow process, but I think as your husband has demonstrated, you can get back. It just takes some time.
And time it took. But after months of training, no official race to run in, and a determination to reach his goal in 2020, Matt embarked on a one-man marathon. 9 months after he was isolated in a hospital bed, my husband, a COVID survivor, who at one point got winded just taking a shower, ran 26.2 miles and was greeted by our daughters at the finish line.
You know, I got COVID, was in the hospital, dealt with loss. At the end, I did something I've never done before, and something that, in all honesty, back in March and April, didn't think would ever be possible.
You okay? In San Jose.
Doing good.
You look amazing. Maureen Naylor. So proud of you. KTVU, Fox 2 News.